This is the candidates forum for the Georgia House District 110. That district includes much of Henry County, but also parts of Butts and Newton counties. There are a total of 4 candidates running for this district seat. This is an open seat. There is no incumbent running for this position. The Republican candidates are Mr. Tom Nicholson of McDonough, Mr. Lee Spahas of McDonough, and Mr. Andrew Andy J. Welch III of Locust Grove. Running as a Democrat in this race is Mr. Rudy Cox of McDonough. Today, we welcome Mr. Tom Nicholson, Mr. Spahas, and Mr. Welch are participating in our candidates forum today. Thank you, gentlemen, for your attendance, your participation, and your interest in public service. A couple of quick rules, and they primarily relate to timekeeping. There will be a 1-minute opening, and I will select the order. It will be strictly timed. The questions will be asked, and there is also a 1-minute time limit on those questions. With respect to the 1-minute timing, you will see a green flag when the timing begins. Halfway through, you will see yellow. And at the conclusion of that time, you will see red, which means that you need to wrap it up. And if you continue speaking, then I will gently nudge you and to get you to wrap it up. 15 seconds beyond the allotted time, I will unfortunately have to come in with a hard stop. So please try to stay on time with your responses. That would be greatly appreciated. It will help the forum run smoothly and efficiently and also benefit the audience as well. There will be a 3-minute closing statement. I again will select the order randomly. Similar proportional timekeeping rules will apply. You'll see a green flag at the initiation. Halfway through, at a minute and a half, you'll see yellow. At the conclusion of the 3-minute time, you'll see a red flag where you'll be expected to wrap up your statement. Any questions? Great. Okay, well, let's begin with our 1-minute opening statement. I'm going to select Mr. Spahas.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity to come here today. I've been involved in the Governmental Affairs Committee in this process before, and I will tell you now that I've run as a candidate, I have a different aspect and appreciation for being on the other side of the questions. But I do appreciate the opportunity to talk today. My name is Lee Spahas. Just real quickly about me. I was born and raised in the Fayetteville area. I moved to Griffin when my parents divorced earlier in life. Graduated from Griffin High School. Went off to college for a couple of years. Came back home and worked for a couple of years in the construction industry. And at that time joined the United States Army to come up with additional funds to pay for college. When I got out of the Army, I settled down here in Henry County because my brother was here for no other reason than that. My brother, who is the solicitor for the Henry County State Court, Chuck Spahas. At that point, I married my wife, Amy, a few years later. Graduated from Clayton State University with a bachelor's in accounting. Worked as a community banker for about 8 years locally until last fall. So that's kind of background on me. I've got a strong finance background, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all today.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to select Mr. Nicholson for his opening statement.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to the Chamber. My name is Tom Nicholson. I have a website. It's tomnicholson.org. I've lived in Henry County for 35 years. I was born in Atlanta, grew up there, was educated at Bellhaven College in Jackson, Mississippi, which is a private conservative Christian college. After that, I was drafted in the United States Army, where I served honorably in Vietnam for a year before serving my full 2-year term and being released and coming back to Georgia. Upon return, I met my wife of 36 years. We've been married. We moved to Henry County 35 years ago. We've raised 3 kids that have gone through the Henry County school systems, and all 3 of them graduated from college. One of them is a school teacher here. Her husband is a school teacher also in Henry County. I'm proud to be running for this office. I respect the fact that the people need representation, and politicians generally tell you what you want to hear. If I'm elected to this office, I plan to be a politician or a representative who will listen to the people, listen to their needs, their desires, and their wants. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. And lastly, the opening statement of Mr. Welch.
Thank you for having us. My name is Andy Welch. I'm running for the 110th district seat. I'm married to a lovely wife, Kara, and we've been married for 10 years now. We have 2 children, Caleb and Sadie. We're members of the McDonough Presbyterian Church, and I'm an active member of the church and a member on the endowment committee. I've lived in the McDonough area all my life, except for when I went to Presbyterian College and then on to serve in the United States Peace Corps. I also attended law school outside of the state. I met my wife in law school. We married. Then I worked in upstate New York for a time. We decided that Henry County would be the perfect place to raise our family. So we moved back down to Henry County, and I've been working here, active in my father's practice at Smith, Welch & Britton, and also active as a community leader with the Henry County Chamber of Commerce, and was elected by the Chamber to serve as a 2010 chairman. I'm a conservative person. I believe in conservative values, the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, smaller government, and lower taxes.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the interviewing portion of the forum. I'm going to backtrack just a bit and talk about the process that got us here. I mentioned this in the previous forum. The Chamber of Commerce collected the questions. The Government Affairs Committee worked on this project through solicitation with Chamber of Commerce members and the public in general. There was a questionnaire that each of the candidates was asked to fill out and submit back to the Chamber. Those questionnaires should be posted on henrychamber.com. I've got that correct. And they will be posted there for the audience's review and the public in general. And these forums are going to be televised on Henry TV 14 as well. I'll give you the specific schedule after we wrap up. But we have our questions through our interviewers. I'm not sure we know how many questions we're going to ask you, and so you certainly don't know. So let's begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Kenneth Kelly. I have the first question. It will be directed to Mr. Nicholson, followed by Mr. Spahos, followed by Mr. Welch. The 2010 Georgia General Assembly passed legislation allowing for a local referendum to determine whether Henry County should have the ability to exercise certain redevelopment powers, including the ability to create tax allocation districts and issue tax allocation bonds. Do you favor the creation of tax allocation districts in Henry County? If so, why? And if not, why not? Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you, sir. The Georgia Redevelopment Powers Act is a little scary to me. It is a 38-page document. The referendum on the ballot just answers basically yes or no. It doesn't explain the referendum. It gives the county vast powers, the governing authority vast powers. It can commit the county to a 30-year bond issue to develop basically private enterprise. I think the county being committed to 30 years is a scary proposition. If the endeavor that it develops is a failure, then the taxpayers will be bound to pay the 30-year bond back. As I put in my statement there, it could be a potential burden to the taxpayers of Henry County. America was not built on tax incentives, and I think private enterprise does not need to be financed by the taxpayer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I am not supportive of any tax increase. However, I am supportive of local decision making. With a tax allocation district question that would be put on a ballot, obviously that's a decision for the voters to make when they go to vote on the issue. What I would ask is that everybody would have to make a decision based on all the information presented. The tax allocation district would be a specific area and circumstance, and there would be a lot of variables there. To ask if I support the tax allocation district, again, it's a decision that is made by voters. That's an enabling legislation that lets us vote on that as a local issue. And once I knew the specifics of a tax allocation district and what it was for and what the money was going to be spent for and what the long-term obligations were, then I, like every other voter in this district, could make that decision about whether or not I supported it or not.
Mr. Welch.
I support local government having the authority and the powers to exercise redevelopment powers, and that includes deciding whether or not to implement those powers fully in the formation of a tax allocation district. That's a decision the Board of Commissioners will have to make. It's also a decision that the Board of Education would have to make on a project-by-project basis. And what's important to note about the redevelopment powers and tax allocation districts is that those projects that are put forward through the tax allocation district have to be public projects. Mr. Nicholson is correct. There's really a need to be concerned about how those tax dollars are used. It really must be a legitimate public purpose. These things should not be used for the gain of a few property owners or the gain of a few developers. This should be to revitalize an existing ongoing industry that would help the public as a whole, not for new development.
My first question, gentlemen, will be on transportation, beginning with Mr. Spahos, Mr. Welch, and Mr. Nicholson. Concept 3 is the Metro-wide vision for public transportation in the Metro Atlanta region that was created in 2008 jointly by GDOT, Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, and the Atlanta Regional Commission. Do you believe, as the plan recommends, that heavy and light rail transit services should be expanded in the region? Please explain why or why not.
I believe that with the challenges that we face locally and in the metro Atlanta area in particular with transportation, every option needs to be studied. As far as rail goes, there's been a lot of talk about it. I know there's money sitting aside. There has been for years for a particular rail project. My concerns are, first of all, what would the constituents of the 110th District wish for and want for relative to that? That's my job to represent them. I would appreciate any input that they would have. I would want to study each in particular one rail line project. I do have some concerns with the funding of it. I have some concerns with the capacity of being able to put a light passenger rail on an existing industrial rail line. But saying all that, I think every transportation option needs to be studied because obviously we have significant transportation challenges in our district.
Mr. Welch.
I think the short answer is that yes, these should be explored. All forms of transportation should be considered and looked at. But I think the bottom line is that you have to look at what's in the best interest of the taxpayers. And in that regard, representing the 110th District, that would be my focus. And I think that if we are going to implement any rail systems, whether it be the Norfolk Southern line through Hampton down to Griffin, which would not affect the 110th District, or down to Jackson through McDonough, the taxpayers, there should not be an increase in the taxes that they would have to pay for that rail system. We have a transportation SPLOST that was adopted, and if the voters choose to put that on the funding of that, then that would be another way to fund it. But I think it should be housed within one agency. We don't need to create a new agency or expand government to do that. We have plenty of existing agencies in which that can be housed. So my concerns are with expanding government and with increasing the tax base.
Mr. Nicholson.
I believe that only light or heavy rail can be effectively utilized if it's efficient and economical. I look at MARTA today. MARTA has a $700 million budget. And I saw the other night on the TV that they'd cut 700 jobs and laid off 300 people. Now, I'm not sure how you do that, but it doesn't seem like it's real efficient to cut 700 jobs and lay off 300 people. There's 400 different somewhere there. The light rail, it has to go, MARTA, for example, is great if you're going from the airport to North Atlanta or if you're going from West Atlanta to East Atlanta. But the tangents in between, there's some problems there getting with the bus service. Macon to Atlanta, I can't see how many people. Well, I'd just like to ask, how many people in this room go from Macon to Atlanta or Hampton to Atlanta on a daily basis or a regular basis, by a show of hands? One person. So if they're, if it's not effective for the citizens that live here and live in the 110th District, then no, I would be against it.
Thank you. This question first will be addressed to Mr. Welch, then to Mr. Nicholson, then Mr. Spahas. Due to the economic downturn and corresponding decreases in revenues, education funding has been slashed. Teachers given furlough days, some teachers laid off, and class sizes increased. At what point will you consider developing additional revenues for education to ensure Georgia's public education system has enough funds to operate at a level that meets the challenges of the 21st century?
Our Georgia Constitution requires that the budget for our budget give at least 50% of the budget to education. And in all respects of life and business, private and public, there is a severe budgetary crunch for all of us. And so I would not support that I can foresee in my first or second year of being an elected representative for the 110th District, supporting any funding increase in forms of a new taxation for that. I would want to look first at what areas of the current state budget and what departments can be cut to reduce spending in those areas and funnel additional spending to supplement the educational budget. So at this point, I don't see the time of when I would do that.
Thank you. Mr. Nicholson.
I'm sorry. I think the top issues with our education system right now is funding, morale, and discipline. But the funding being the top issue. I've made my entire platform on cutting government waste and reducing taxes. The state of Georgia has a $17.9 billion budget. Yesterday, I was on Jodico Road in Henry County. I was stopped by a pickup truck, a heavy commercial truck, and another pickup truck with lights on them. There was a stop sign there, and 5 people filling a pothole that's not as big as this computer screen here. To me, is on the right of way. That's not very efficient. There is a tremendous amount of waste in government, tremendous amount of waste, and we need to find those areas, cut the waste, cut the excess spending we have, and there will be money left over to stimulate the economy, to stimulate jobs, to pay the teachers. Teachers don't deserve furloughs. They should never be laid off. Our kids are our most important asset. And at state level, we need to do everything we can to fund education fully.
Mr. Spahas.
In my introduction, I failed to mention that I have 3 children in the Henry County Public School System. I can tell you first and foremost that I feel it more than not necessarily more than anybody, but as much as anybody in this room. I'm a significant supporter of the Henry County School Board and the Board of Education, have been and will always will be, particularly as long as I've got kids there, but I understand that that's vital for economic development as well. I feel like we need to be taking money, as Tom just mentioned, we need to create efficiencies otherwise in the state budget, to quit taking it from education and start returning it back to education and take it from other places. It could come out of, the government feels a need to fund every social welfare program, but they don't want to fund the education and the future of our students. And I have an issue with that. But to answer the question, at no point would I get to a point where I felt like we needed to look at additional tax revenues as a way to increase education funding.
This question will be directed first to Mr. Nicholson, followed by Mr. Spahas and Mr. Welch. Do you support or oppose interbasin transfers of water in Georgia? Please explain.
Excuse me, say that again.
Do you support or oppose interbasin transfers of water in Georgia?
I'm sorry, I didn't know what you said.
Do you support or oppose interbasin transfers of water?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure what that question asks for. I'm not familiar with interbasin transfers of water, and I'd have to study it and come up with a yes or a no, but I'm not familiar with that.
Thank you. Mr. Spahas.
Interbasin transfers of water is a very complex issue in the fact that everybody lives downstream from someone else. We've seen it with the state in our water wars with Alabama and Florida the last several years. And unfortunately, it is a complex issue. To say whether I support them or not support them, I guess would require to have the full set of facts in making those decisions. I can't express an opinion whether I support it or oppose it at this point because I don't know if we're talking about specific interbasins, if you can generalize it across the state of Georgia, or if you could have to have special rules for one basin versus another. So without having all the facts and information to make that decision, I couldn't render an opinion about whether I would support it or oppose it.
Mr. Welch?
Yes, ma'am. Just in Henry County alone, we have 2 separate water basins, and we presently, as a community of water users, transfer water from one basin to the other. I would support interbasin transfers, the concept as it is today, allowing that to occur. It is common throughout the state of Georgia that interbasin transfers exist and goes on at the present day. There are other basins that the 110th districts feed into, and so it would be important for us to allow for those particular water authorities, those local governmental agencies that have been established by the people at the local level to provide them with an essential service of water, to have the flexibility to take the water from another basin, if they can acquire it and use it, and transfer it into another basin for the benefit of the public.
Okay. I have the next question. It's directed to Mr. Spahas first, Mr. Welch second, and Mr. Nicholson third. This year, lawmakers were faced with a $1.3 billion shortfall in the state budget. Legislation was introduced that would increase cigarette tax by $1 and, if matched with federal Medicaid dollars, could have brought in more than $1 billion to the state. However, the bill never made it to either floor for a vote. Would you support a tax increase on tobacco as a means to raise state revenues? Please explain.
In a short answer, no. I would not support any tax increase, whether it be taxing a lesser represented class of citizens versus another. In other words, to tax smokers because there's lesser of them and it would probably hurt less at the polls. It still is a tax increase that I would not support. And that's one reason that I run for this position, is that my concern is that with the extraordinary economic challenges that we continue to face at the state, it's going to become increasingly easier for the General Assembly to want to justify a tax increase. And again, just like anybody who has their own household budget, I continue to believe that I can't arbitrarily raise my revenues to balance my budget. I have to reduce expenses. As painful as that may be, that's how we have to begin to run our state budget and continue to balance our budget by cutting expenses and not raising taxes.
My answer to the question is no. This is just another Band-Aid in trying to fix a tax system in the state of Georgia that needs to be reformed. As part of my campaign, I've been running on the issue that we need to eliminate income tax in the state of Georgia, that we need to move away from taxation that hinders productivity and move toward taxation that actually taxes consumption. So I'm looking at this from a perspective of, if we're going to talk about tinkering with the tax code, let's look at it from an overall, the entire tax code. Let's reform the system. Let's make it work for Georgia. Let's make the tax system help small businesses create jobs, retain employment, produce products, and make this a competitive state to be in. So to answer this question, no. It would have to be part of a comprehensive tax reform in order for me to consider it.
Yes, sir.
I agree with these two gentlemen. I think you start a severe precedent when you start taxing any specific group. As Lee said, smokers are only about 30% of the people, so we're taxing 30%, and that's good for politicians because they get the other 70% of the vote. But any tax increase, I'm opposed to. I'll qualify that. I'm opposed to any tax increase other than a potential tax increase on gasoline. Gasoline has been set for the last 40-some years at a specific rate, and I think there's a possibility of maybe a slight increase in the cents rate on gasoline. But any other tax I'm opposed to. We just need to cut non-essential services, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to get in there and tell people that, hey, we can't do this year because we need to fund education. Education is a priority. So I'm opposed to any tax increase other than the possibility of gasoline.
I have the next question. It'll be addressed first to Mr. Welch, then to Mr. Nicholson, and then to Mr. Spahas. Do you believe that state government has grown too big and is involved in non-governmental functions? If yes, specifically, which governmental programs or expenditures would you reduce or eliminate?
That's a pretty timely question. I don't know if folks were reading the paper this weekend, but there's a spa that this state sponsors at Brasstown Ball that has been designed to be the leading spa in all of the state. It's paid for entirely with public taxpayer dollars. The director is financed with public taxpayer dollars. The construction and architectural consulting paid for with architectural dollars. Since when do the taxpayers in the state of Georgia need the state of Georgia as a government to be involved in providing spa treatment? This is one of those programs that I was shocked to read in the paper. It's one of the things that I would like to see eliminated. And there are countless others. I think Tom's right. He says, people are out there filling potholes. If that can be done more efficiently, then it needs to be done. The Georgia Department of Transportation over the last 3 years has been in the headlines for an amazing amount of funding abuses, the contracts not completed, and that's another agency that would have to be reformed in addition to, I think, Health and Human Services.
Mr. Nicholson?
Sir. I believe government does best what it does least. I think Thomas Jefferson, who's a lot older than I am, believe it or not, said it best. He said, when government's big enough to give you everything you want, they're big enough to take everything you have. That's a scary proposition. Government has gotten too big. What needs to be cut specifically? The spa for sure. But I'm sure there's other areas that we need to look at. I have said before, I would not be opposed to having a citizens review panel chosen maybe from the voter list of volunteers, school teachers, transportation workers, retirees that could come in and analyze the Georgia state budget. And there could be several groups set up in several metropolitan areas that had the opportunity through the open government law to look at the specifics of the budget and make recommendations of where excessive spending could be cut.
Mr. Spahas?
I absolutely believe that the state and as well the federal government have way overstepped their bounds and are encroaching on private enterprise in multiple areas. I'm a big believer in the free enterprise system, and that the more government gets involved, the more problems they cause, as opposed to where they're trying to solve issues, they actually create more problems than they solve. I believe that any time that private enterprise can fill a role, then private enterprise should fill that role and not government. They both touched on transportation issues. I believe that if we did transportation budget decisions based on needs analysis as opposed to who had the ability to bring money back to their district, then we would be more efficient in dealing with our transportation infrastructure, which in turn would create efficiencies within our budget where we're putting our money where we need to. But the bottom line is government needs to stay out of business, and that's a lesson that hopefully we can tell our government.
I have the next question, and it's directed to Mr. Nicholson first, followed by Mr. Spahas, followed by Mr. Welch. What is your recommendation for addressing illegal immigration in Georgia?
Illegal immigration is a crime. Anybody who is in this country illegally is a criminal. They need to be dealt with according to the laws, federal laws, the state laws, Arizona's law. I don't think we can get around it. Georgia needs laborers. We need workers. But we need legal workers who are paying their taxes, who are supporting the government that we provided for. The roads, the highways, the hospitals, the police protection. We need to make sure that the people, the workers of Georgia, are legal, they're paying their taxes, and if they're not, they need to be sent back to where they came from or be made legal before they stay here.
Mr. Spahos.
The challenge with illegal immigration is that, first of all, it is illegal. When I was first asked that question, my answer was, well, it's illegal. Why do we even talk about it? First thing we need to do is we need to enforce the laws we have, or we need to change them to something that we're going to enforce. Right now we have laws that aren't being enforced. I'm a firm believer that if we make the proposition less attractive and make those folks that are illegally here and are subverting the system pay the same taxes you and I pay, that it becomes a less attractive prospect. I can't fault somebody that wants to do better for their family by providing something that they otherwise couldn't get. But what we need to do is we need to start getting tougher on it. If we're going to allow immigrants to be here legally, which I am all for, then we need to get to the point where they're paying for the services they use, because right now they are using our services and not contributing to our state budget. And what revenues they do pay, they're paying to the federal government, but they're using our state services, and that's something we've got to fix.
Mr. Welch.
The immigration issue is a federal issue at its heart. But let me start off by saying this, that there are legal means by which to get into the United States and become a documented worker. And the process has become very difficult for many to do so. That process needs to be streamlined and made more effective so that they can come in. Lee's grandfather, I think, came in from Greece. My grandfather immigrated in from Denmark after World War II, after serving in Reconstruction. And they did that, at least I know that my grandfather did, I'm sure Lee's did as well, through a documented process. They did it legally. And that process needs to work today, but it doesn't. The issue of what Georgia can do, Georgia needs to enforce its own law. In 2006, it adopted the most comprehensive and the most stringent illegal immigration law in the country, only surpassed by Arizona's law recently, which I've read.
Please wrap up.
And we need to enforce that law.
This question is first addressed to Mr. Spahos. What will be your top 3 policy legislative priorities, and please list in the order of importance?
Again, I'll restate what I've said a couple of times already. We need to begin to reduce the tax burden on the state of Georgia citizens. We do that by creating efficiencies in the state budget, while we also reduce the scope of our government. It's one thing to reform the tax code, and I am all for a fair tax, as Mr. Welch has mentioned. My concern is that if it's not done in conjunction with the federal government, we actually pass a backdoor tax increase on the state of Georgia residents. So we need to be focused on reducing taxes instead of just reforming the tax code. We need to, as a state of Georgia, we need to fight the federal government and their imposition of putting Obamacare on us. We can't afford it. We don't want it. And we need to let the federal government know that. We need to fight it in the courts, and we need to fight it in the legislature. And finally, we need to do everything that the state has any ability to do through incentives and tax credits to foster job creation in the private industry, not in the government.
Mr. Welch.
Yeah, the first one is going to be is elimination of the state income tax and a reform to the tax system as a whole. We need to move to a fair tax system that does not tax productivity, but that taxes consumption. This is not new. This is being done in our competitive states, Florida and Tennessee and Texas, and South Carolina is considering it as well. Secondly, we need to revise the zero budgeting bill that was vetoed by the governor. Budgeting process is going to be critical to how we deal with the budget going forward. That process needs to be incentivized for government to cut back. Thirdly, we have to work on redistricting. As a lawyer, I understand the importance of putting together a good district for Henry County going forward. And it's important that that is defensible, because we know the Obama administration is going to fight against it. We also have to fight against Obamacare, which I have advocated for strongly, and as a lawyer will continue to do so if you elect me to the House. I'm also going to say that we need to relook at the gun rights for people in Georgia in light of the recent decision by the United States Supreme Court, and make sure that does not infringe upon our citizens' rights under the Second Amendment.
Mr. Nicholson.
I think the top priority for any legislature next year will have to be the budget. We're down from 2 years ago, we're down to 17.9, and there's going to be budget cuts again. But I think the way that we need to pursue this budget is through, as I've said earlier, eliminating government waste and reducing taxes. Now, you can't reduce taxes and make more money. I know that. But by eliminating waste, you can have more money. By reducing taxes, you can spur the economy, create economic growth, and create jobs. And Ronald Reagan did it pretty well. By cutting taxes, we had a great incentive and a great rebound of our economy. The second improvement I think we need to work on is education. We've got to educate our kids. We've got to support our teachers, to support our administrators. I'd like to see more parental involvement in the classroom. I'd like to see our teachers receive a full day's pay for a full day's work. My daughter, for example, is a Henry County teacher. Many nights I've gone to her house to see the grandkids, and she's been working. And thirdly, transportation.
Next question I'll address to Mr. Welch and Mr. Nicholson and Mr. Spahos. What other policies and initiatives, if any, do you think the state should implement to spur economic development and create the conditions needed for businesses to expand and prosper?
The first one, again, and this is going to sound repetitive, but I think that it's important that we re-examine the tax code in the state of Georgia. Elimination of the income tax, removing that tax burden away from productivity would encourage manufacturing jobs in the state of Georgia. Just last year, we lost 22,000 manufacturing jobs in the state. That has to stop. And I don't think we need to do it by creating public programs. We need to do it by reducing the tax burden, incentivizing moving your business here to Henry County and to the state of Georgia to produce jobs and goods. Reforming the tax code is one way to do that. Improving our education system is another. We need to incentivize for high school students the meaning of a diploma. A graduate from high school should come away with skills. They can be on a career pathway towards a career, whether it be an EMT, police, fire, or whether it be going to college. They need skills at the high school level to be gainfully employed when they graduate, and that's one of the policies I think we need to move forward on in the state.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, sir. What other policies and initiatives, if any, do you think the state should implement to spur economic development, create the conditions needed for business to expand and prosper?
Well, I think we're maybe being a little redundant here also, but taxes, tax decreases, businesses. I've been a small business owner for 37 years, retired, semi-retired now. Businesses cannot function if they're stymied with continuous rules and regulations, if they're stymied with continuous tax increases. Businessmen can't find capital right now. Banks will not loan the kind of capital that the businesses need to grow. Businesses are afraid to hire because they don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We never have known, but right now in these economic times it's even less, it's more challenging. So we need to cut our tax base. We need to cut our taxes down and give business the opportunity to grow, as well as some of the restrictions that we put on businesses. My business in East Point, I can't park a trailer on grass because if I park it on grass, it's against the regulation of the city or the county state. I have to park on asphalt. Doesn't make sense. But, excuse me.
Mr. Spahos.
The state should consider any and every opportunity they can to create incentive for employers to hire particularly the unemployed. And one thing they can do is, instead of, what we need to start moving towards is moving away from unemployment benefits that are paid from here to eternity, and start taking those same funds and giving incentive to hire, to where not only are you reducing our unemployment expenses at the state level, you're creating new revenue sources by creating those jobs. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's something that we need to start doing. And I just want to reiterate, on the fair tax issue, I am a supporter of the fair tax at the federal government level, period. If the state of Georgia eliminates an income tax and replaces it strictly with a sales tax, our sales tax in Henry County will be 11.5%. And we will lose the ability to write off that income tax deduction on our federal return, which is going to result in a tax burden that the state of Georgia taxpayers pay to the federal government an additional approximately $1 billion. So we don't need to do it absent of the federal government doing the same thing first. And the states that were mentioned
Please wrap up.
are ones that have significantly higher property taxes or significantly higher corporate income taxes or have a different economy than the state of Georgia.
I have the next question. It will be addressed to Mr. Nicholson first, Mr. Spahas, and then Mr. Welch. What will you do to address needed improvements to Georgia Highway 42 and the extension of Georgia Highway 20 westward to I-85?
I think definitely there needs to be some improvements on Georgia Highway 42. If you travel back and forth on 75, you have seen the nightmare that 75 can be during rush hour or during high traffic weekends, that kind of thing. I think it can be a tremendous alternative to 75, which can also bring additional revenue business to the businesses of Henry County and Butts County. Now, Georgia 20 going to 85, that not being in this 110th district, being pretty much removed from the district, and the district starts east of McDonough, I'd be willing to listen to the representatives who have that particular area and work with them in a manner that they seem their people necessary, that their people would like the representation.
Mr. Spahas?
I'll go back to a statement I made earlier that I feel that part of the problem with transportation infrastructure challenges we have, particularly with Highway 42 and then also in our district, Highway 81, those are two of the highest traffic two-lane highway corridors in the state of Georgia that aren't being improved because we're not basing transportation funding issues on needs. We're doing it some other manner. If we would move to funding it based on needs, and if needed be, establish an independent panel to determine how those needs are based, but that we start making transportation decisions based on needs. As far as Georgia 20 goes, part of that highway lays within the 110th district. A larger part of it's outside of the district. But what we have to do is a county delegation. We have to work together to effectively represent Henry County as a whole at the state level. And that's something we can do along with the other representatives and senators that represent our district, is we reunify our county delegation so that we can be communicating in one voice to the state when those decisions are made.
I've served as the Chamber Transportation Chairman for that committee. I was appointed by Jason Harper to serve on the formation of a comprehensive transportation plan in Henry County. And through those experiences, we developed a plan that does provide a priority list. It does identify priorities for Henry County. And that plan was adopted in no small effort due to the members of our committee working hard to push the plan and get it adopted for Henry County. So there is a plan. And as far as expanding 42 Highway, that's one of the top priorities in that plan, is widening 42 Highway through Henry County. So we need to follow that plan. And that plan has been submitted, and it's won an award at the state level. And it helps guide our funding policy for the county. Now, as for Highway 20, the portion of Highway 20 that the question is asking about is not in our district. The portion of Highway 20 that's being asked about in this question extends over to I-75 and goes west through Hampton. and that should be looked at as terms of an alternative mode of transportation to provide an east-west connection corridor for the economic development of the county.
This next question is addressed first to Mr. Spahas. Do you support vouchers for private education, and do you support charter schools?
I do support school choices through whether it be vouchers or charter schools. I am a believer that school choice will improve education standards in the same way that business competition forces other businesses to become more competitive. I believe that school vouchers and charter schools can exist with a good public school system. I believe that we need to communicate effectively with our local school boards, and that we can accomplish having both charter schools and a voucher program and still have a quality public education system. It's interesting that you asked that, because the school board in Henry County is appealing that process right now because they don't feel that way, which my opponent's law firm is engaged to represent the school board in that situation. So they're going to be paid to represent the school board regardless of what the citizens of the district believe. So I do think it's important that we consider those alternatives and that we represent the district, or the citizens of our district.
Mr. Welch.
It's common knowledge that our school board is elected by the people, and they're the direct representatives of the people. And on the issue of vouchers and charter schools, I support special need vouchers for the state. I think it's important that you have school choice and that you have it in the appropriate manner, and that you also have good competition. Charter schools provides that opportunity, and I personally believe that we should have charter schools, but I believe it should be controlled at a local level and not in Atlanta. And I think that's a core problem where the tax dollars are collected by the local people. It's the local taxpayers that are paying for those dollars that go into the system. Those dollars should be controlled by a Board of Education. They should be controlled on a local level. But a charter school authority could be created at the local level, and people could be appointed to that or even elected to that position to help set the curriculum for charter schools in the 110th District. And I would support that.
Mr. Nicholson.
I do support charter schools, and I do support vouchers. Mr. Welch has said that our school board is elected by the people and represent the people. You know, our county commission is elected by the people and represents the people also. And that's a great theory, but not always do our school board, our county commission, or other elected officials go to the people for the answers. You know, when I'm elected as your representative, one of my main things that I plan on doing, being retired, being able to go to the people and get the people's desires, the people's needs. Not always do the representatives listen to what the people want. They assume. And I think that's very unfair and not a good plan. I plan on spending a lot of time in the district, a lot of time talking to people face to face, asking people, what is your opinion? Even taking straw polls and getting the opinion of the people that live in the 110th District, and thereby having the ability to represent their wishes and not political wishes. A politician wants to tell you what you want to hear. I want to tell you the truth.
Gentlemen, this will be the 12th and final question for today. Amen. Beginning with Mr. Welch. What will you do to encourage and support a One Henry approach to collaborative decision-making and leadership?
As serving with the Henry County Chamber of Commerce as the previous chair-elect in 2009 and chairman in 2010, the Chamber Board and the Executive Committee and individuals have been very active in trying to ensure what Jason Harper worked on putting together in Henry County, which was the One Henry Project. And it's important that that initiative continue. The One Henry Project led to having a comprehensive transportation plan. It also led to having a joint comprehensive land use plan. together, Henry County and its cities have been able to be more effective than separated. And so I think it's important that we do foster that and we encourage that. And I think part of that is going to be working with the colleagues that also represent the other areas of Henry County, District 109, for example, and working with those House representatives and the Senate representatives to work on encouraging that process and not creating division.
Mr. Nicholson.
We were asked a very similar question in Butts County the other day. Butts County wants one representative for the entire county. My approach to that was, if it's demographically possible, yes, that would be a great idea. Realistically, somebody has to be split up. Butts County has 2 representatives now, and I look at that as a positive approach, that they have 2 votes as opposed to 1. I look at Henry County as having 9 representatives, 6 House members and 3 senators. I look at that as us having 9 votes as opposed to 1 or 2. So, yes, I think we need to work towards a Henry County, a complete Henry County. But let's take advantage of the fact that we have 9 votes instead of 1 or 2 or 3, however many we're going to have. And let's work on these legislators to work with us to make this the greatest county in the state of Georgia.
Mr. Spahos.
As far as the One Henry initiative goes, I do remember back before that initiative was established, and there was what seemed to be a lack of communication between the different cities and the county governments. I'm a firm believer that communication solves, if not all, most all problems. And I think that's what One Henry, if nothing else, has done, is opened up communication lines between all the parties that have an interest. We need to do the same thing. We need to continue to do the same thing. We need to have open communication with our state representatives, with our mayors, with our city councils, with our county commissioners. We may not all always have the same desires. We may all have our own selfish interest. But in the end, we all have to come to some consensus about what we can agree on and what we can disagree on. And going back to something that was said about having 9 representatives in Henry County, we need to do what we can with this seat to establish a better county representation at the state level to more unify our delegation, and hopefully that's something we can move towards, where those 9 folks speak in one voice.
Okay, that concludes our interview portion. How about those panelists? You did a great job. Thank you very much. Keeping us moving very efficiently in an organized manner. Now we've come to the closing remarks. And I have shuffled the deck, and I'd like Mr. Nicholson to start with his 3-minute closing remark.
Well, thank you, sir. 1 minute is not long. All right. I come to you today to ask you for your vote as your next representative from the 110th District. I'm a conservative, Christian, Republican businessman. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've been a businessman for 37 years. I've raised a family here in Henry County. I've been married to the same woman for 36 years, and I appreciate her support, and she's been a tremendous support over those years. We need a new direction in government. We need to get government back in the hands of the people. Too many times are the lobbyists or special interest groups have too much influence on our legislators. And too many times our legislators vote the way the lobbyists and the special interest groups want them. We need to increase the funding for our schools. We should never have and would never need to lay off teachers. Our children, as I said earlier, are our greatest asset. Our teachers are the second greatest asset. We've laid off the administrators also. It has to be demoralizing for people to have 10 days, 8 days, I believe it is this year, 10 for the administrators, of vacation time, if you would. But it's not a vacation for them. My daughter, son-in-law both teach school. They're missing a substantial amount of their pay next year. But they're still teaching school, and they're proud to do it. We don't need to lay off firefighters or police officers. These are the people that protect our lives, protect our homes. I don't want to be one to dial 911 and they say we can't get to the fire right now. Call us back in 2 weeks when we call the firefighters back. Or have a heart attack and have to call 911. They don't have an ambulance available. We need to work on funding our county employees. Our state school board, our state school funds need to be fully implemented back. We need to cut taxes. And as I said earlier, when government gets big enough to give you everything you want, and we're in a position where people want everything, then they're big enough to take everything you have. I'm afraid of a government like that. And Thomas Jefferson said that many years ago. We're moving towards a socialistic state. We have the Obamacare health bill. It's going to tell us what doctor you're going to go to, what kind of insurance you're going to have. Pretty soon you're going to be told what kind of lights we have up here, what kind of light bulbs. You know, we're moving towards socialism. We need to get back to government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate the chamber, and our website is tomnicholson.org, and I appreciate your vote support in the next election. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next closing statement will be by Mr. Welch.
We're going to, as a elected representative from the 110th district, the State House is going to face some severe budgetary constraints next year. Another $1 billion shortfall is expected, as stimulus money will not be there for us to fall back on. The crux of our campaign is to create jobs for Georgia, to allow the public to take the public sector out of job creation, which is essentially what stimulus is doing, and put the money, invest the time and resources back into the private sector creating jobs. Those jobs are sustainable. Part of our program is the elimination of an income tax. When people tell you that they want smaller government, they want lower taxes, they want all the conservative values that you hear routinely as boilerplate premises of their campaign. The question I always have is, how are you going to do any of that? Don't tell me the guiding principles that I live by. Tell me how you're going to do something. We're proposing the elimination of the income tax in the state of Georgia. If we do, as Mr. Spahos is suggesting, wait around for the federal government to do this, we'll be waiting forever. Or we'll get something like Obamacare forced down, shoved down our throats. It doesn't work. And it doesn't work in job creation. It works for some special interest or someone else, someone out in Nevada. That's not what I want to see. We have very important state right issues that are before this country. And we need, as a state, to take leadership positions on those. If we do nothing, we may get nothing from the federal government as well. And that would be what we have with immigration. So it's important that we take the lead on dismantling Obamacare, that we take the lead on fair tax, that we take the lead on being proactive in creating jobs in Georgia. We also have to improve the education system. We have to create career pathways to get our high school students to graduate and be productive taxpaying members of our community. That is extremely important. It will save parents dollars that they would otherwise invest in college tuition. They would save money by getting college credit while they're while their students are in high school. This is important. We also have to restrict the size of government, and by cutting back on the tax code, we may be able to shrink the size of the Department of Revenue. We also need to look at shrinking the size of the Department of Transportation and using those funds that we save in those areas to improve education and more of the essential functions that government should provide. I'm Andy Welch. I'm here asking for your vote for the 110th District, and I would appreciate that. I think I have the leadership and experience and a servant's heart to represent the 110th District. Thank you.
Thank you all again for having us today. I want to give you a little bit more information about me and what I do. I attend church at Locust Grove United Methodist Church. I'm the finance director for our church down there. I'm a fiscal conservative. And what concerns me in this race is that the fair tax is something that sounds like a good vote-getting gimmick. And it is something that is certainly needs to be implemented at the federal level. I hope people will understand what I'm saying when I say that if we eliminate state income tax, strictly replace it with a sales tax, we're going to have the highest sales tax in the United States. By far. I do not see that being attractive for economic development. We will also increase the tax burden on the state of Georgia taxpayers by losing that deduction on our federal tax return. And that's something I cannot support, giving Georgia taxpayers a $1 billion tax increase. So it's not that I don't support the fair tax. I do support the fair tax. I don't support us doing it at the state level and giving Georgians a $1 billion tax increase. These aren't numbers I made up. You can go to the Georgia State University website. They've done extensive research. They also tell you why all the states that currently don't have income tax aren't good models for Georgia. So I just want to be clear on that. I am a true Republican. I've voted Republican my whole life. I read in the paper yesterday where one of my opponents had voted for presumably President Obama because he cast his anti-Hillary vote. This is a Republican primary. You need a true Republican representing you if that's what you want in Atlanta. I will be that. I will never cross over because I thought I needed to cast my anti-Hillary vote. When the Republicans need me as a voter, I will be that voter. My opponent, when the Republicans needed him, voted for a Democrat. So to me, that's a big deal. I think that we need someone that's going to be true to what they say. They're going to be honorable. They're going to have integrity. And they're going to represent you. And they're going to represent you and only you and not special interest groups. I am pro-life. I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I believe we need to curb the use of eminent domain. And I want to clarify on the pro-life issue. It's been made a big issue in previous forums. I had a concern with the Georgia Right to Life's position on in vitro fertilization. What they said on their website did not agree with what their position was. We've talked about that. They have agreed that they're going to clarify that position, and I have received Georgia Right to Life's endorsement for being pro-life. My name is Lee Spahos. My website is leespahos.com, and I'd appreciate your vote on July 20th. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, there's been some allegations made here that I think need to be responded to.
I'm sorry, we don't have any provision for rebuttals.
Well, I think that the people here need to hear some information that some people want to spread information about campaigns, and I think it's important that the truth be told. He wants to talk about integrity. If he has integrity, then he'll yield the floor and allow me to speak. If he doesn't, then he'll just allow this information to be spread about us.
I sympathize, but there is no provision for a rebuttal here. I'm going to have to stop. I'm sorry.
Well, I urge people to consider that in this campaign, in this election season, that Mr. Spahos is being supported by an individual who's raised over $200,000 for Roy Barnes.
I'm sorry, Andy. I'm going to have to stop you.
Talk about Democratic support. This is important.
All right. Well, we've essentially opened it up, so we're going to give each party 2 additional minutes.
Thank you.
You're on yours.
Thank you. Mr. Spahos wants to cast me as a Democrat because I supported John McCain and Sarah Palin, and I worked tirelessly for this party. I have been appointed 3 different committees by Republicans. I serve on Lynn Westmoreland's Transportation Advisory Committee. I have been appointed by Jason Harper to serve on 2 other committees. I have helped raise money for Johnny Isaacsen's campaign and Lynn Westmoreland's campaign. I've worked for this party and for candidates who I believe in, and they're all Republican. I don't have supporters in my campaign that are financially supporting Roy Barnes. I don't have people in my campaign that are supporting my campaign who serve on his finance committee. I don't have people in my campaign who went to the 2008 Democratic National Convention as a delegate to vote for a Democratic candidate. I don't have those things. What he wants to do is just say that because I voted to help my party and vote against Hillary Clinton, that somehow disqualifies me from this position. I urge you to look at the record. I urge you to look at my support. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately to this process. I've worked hard for Republican candidates that I believe in. that share my core conservative values, and I have supported them, I have worked their campaigns, and I'm here today to take those same conservative values to the House. And I'm not here to misrepresent people's records or what they're doing, and I'm actually just ashamed that this has come up the way it has. I urge you to consider the issue of integrity. I urge you to look at people's records, and I urge you to ask the question, who's been working for the Republican Party? Who's been helping? That's me. I'm the only one up here that has those qualifications and has that extensive background with this party.
Well, Tom?
My turn?
Yes?
Well, thank you again. I'd just like to say my first Republican ballot, I believe it was my first one, was I was in Vietnam, in a combat zone. I served my country well, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud to be a Vietnam veteran. Also, I've spent 35 years volunteering with the Chick-fil-A Bowl. I'm the Bowl Week chairman for that event, responsible for the teams for the day they come into town till the day they go out. I've been on the board of directors of Cure Childhood Cancer. I've served as finance chairman for Bethany Baptist Church here in McDonough. I'm currently on the board of Shining Light Ministries, the only drug and alcohol rehabilitation house in Henry County for women. And we have, I believe, about 7 graduates now that have gone through a year-long program. And you spoke of a servant's heart, and I appreciate that. But my record of a servant's heart is through charitable organizations. I've spent most of my life with the support of my wife and my family, giving back to the community. I look at this position as not a job. I look at it to be able to go out and serve the people of the community, serve the people of the 110th District in another way, not so much in a charitable way, but being able to serve the people, finding out what their needs are, and going forward and representing their needs in the state of Georgia House of Representatives. I would certainly appreciate your vote. My name's Tom Nicholson, and it's tomnicholson.org. And it's an email. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to respond. Thank you very much, and thanks again to the Chamber.
Right. Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to clarify before we go to our last candidate that the original format did not include a round of rebuttals or questions. Perhaps in the future you should look at adding at that. But somebody has to be last, and this will be the last 2 minutes allocated to Lee.
I would just like to say I find it interesting that my opponent apparently knows who my contributors are, considering there have been no financial disclosures filed yet. I don't know where that information comes from. I don't know who he's alluding to. If you'd mind naming, I would appreciate knowing. I will say that I don't have unlimited financial resources to finance my campaign. I can't go dollar for all the campaigns in this race or the candidates in this race. I acknowledge that. I'm not going to try to, but I have to run a campaign that gives the conservative Republican voters an opportunity to know who the candidates are in this race, and that requires accepting donations. If someone's willing to make a campaign contribution to my campaign, then those are greatly needed funds, and I appreciate that. I don't see how that draws me any connection to Roy Barnes. If we want to talk about affiliations with Roy Barnes, my family certainly doesn't have any of them. My law firm has never made a contribution to the Roy Barnes campaign, so I don't know where that comes from. Fact is, I just wanted to clarify that there are people in this race that are true conservative Republicans, and I'm one of those. I want to represent the citizens of the 110th District, free of any conflict of interest, and will always listen to the citizens of the district and no one else. No one else pays my salary, and all I want to do is represent you. And again, it's Lee Spahos, leespahos.com, and I appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Very well. Thank you all. That concludes our candidates forum for House District 110. It was an informative and spirited forum, certainly. I have a list of housekeeping matters and also thank yous. First of all, I want to thank the candidates themselves. I'm fully aware and humbled by anybody that chooses to take on and offers themselves for public service. As we all know, it's an easy job to sit back and criticize, and there's a long list of applicants for that job. However, it does take a special servant's heart and also all of these candidates to offer that to the public. So thank you for that. Secondly, I'd like to thank again the volunteers on my Government Affairs Committee. What a great group. And I feel like as moderator that I have piloted a plane that was on autopilot. So thank you for that, for your organization and offering of those outstanding questions. I also would be remiss if I did not thank the Chamber staff. These things do not happen, and they do not get beamed down from above without a lot of work from a lot of good people behind the scenes. The Chamber has an outstanding staff, but like many of us in the private sector, they have struggled with budgets and struggled with diminished staff. So I certainly want to thank them for their efforts, in particular Kay Pippin, our Executive Director. Thank you, Kay. And I want to thank the audience. Again, this presentation that you heard today will be available on Henry TV 14. For Charter cable customers, it will be broadcast July 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th at 9 a.m., 2 p.m., and 7 p.m. So certainly there's plenty of opportunities to watch these forums again. We already are in early voting. The primary, as all of you in this room probably know, is July 20th. So I encourage you, as many of the candidates have themselves, to exercise our right to vote here in this wonderful country. Again, the panelists are esteemed timekeeper who I could have not survived without. Julie Griffin for her coordination and assistance here today. And also the candidate questionnaires, which are already posted or will be posted on the Chamber of Commerce website, www.henrycounty.com. In addition, I am told that the Henry County government itself will have these forums on demand at henryco.go.org. So there are many different ways to access this information. I hope it was helpful, informative, and I must say, just to editorialize a bit, I was very impressed with the knowledge and the quality of the responses from all of the candidates here today. I wish all the candidates the best of luck in the upcoming primary in general. We're done.